You know what a predator is supposed to do. It hunts, it kills, and eventually it eats. Now imagine a jaguar moving quietly through the wetlands of Brazil. It spots a cayman resting near the water. The cayman isn't some helpless animal waiting to be caught. It has teeth, armor, and enough strength to make the encounter dangerous. And yet, jaguars can hunt and eat caymans. That creates a strange question. If predators can eat other predators, why don't they do it all the time? Why doesn't a wolf look at a fox and think, dinner? And why doesn't every large predator spend its time hunting the smaller predators living around it? The answer isn't that predators refuse to eat predators. They clearly can. The more interesting question is whether that other predator is actually worth attacking. Because being able to kill something and having a good reason to kill it are two very different things. And once you start looking at that difference, the food chain becomes much stranger than it first appears. When you watch a predator hunt, the sequence can look almost automatic. It finds something, follows it, catches it, kills it, and eats it. But from the predator's point of view, every hunt comes with a cost. Searching takes energy, chasing takes more, and handling prey can become difficult or dangerous, depending on what the animal is trying to catch. So being physically capable of killing something doesn't automatically make that animal a good meal. A jaguar hunting a cayman is a useful example. Caymans can be dangerous prey, but they can also be abundant in the wetlands where jaguars live. Researchers studying jaguar predation in Brazil have recorded caymans as an important part of the prey taken in their study area. The interesting part isn't simply that the jaguar is strong enough to kill a cayman, it's that the local environment can make that particular opportunity worthwhile. So the useful question isn't just, can this predator kill that animal? It's, does this opportunity make sense? A target might provide plenty of food and still be a bad choice if it takes too much energy to catch or carries too much risk. On the other hand, an animal that looks dangerous can become a worthwhile target when the circumstances make the reward large enough. And when the target happens to be another predator, the calculation becomes even more complicated. Because before asking whether it is worth eating, we have to ask something more basic. What kind of predator are we talking about? The word predator can make nature sound more organized than it really is. It suggests a permanent rank, as if an animal either belongs among the hunters or belongs among the hunted. But animals don't stay inside those categories. Two predators can both hunt other animals while being completely different in size and strength. The smaller one may be a successful hunter in its own environment, yet still be vulnerable when a much larger predator appears. Life stage can change the relationship as well. A young predator may be far easier to attack than a fully grown adult of the same species, even though both technically have the same role as hunters. So before asking why predators don't eat predators, you have to ask a simpler question. Which predator? The label tells you what an animal does, but it doesn't tell you how difficult that animal is to kill, how dangerous it is to approach, or whether the size difference makes an attack realistic. A predator can hunt one species while being hunted by another, and that means the word predator doesn't describe a permanent position in nature. It describes what the animal is doing in a particular relationship. That creates a strange possibility. The animal competing with you for food may also be something you could eat. And ecology actually has a name for that kind of interaction. It sounds complicated, but the basic idea is surprisingly simple. Two predators use some of the same resources, so they compete. Then one predator kills and consumes the other. At that point, two relationships are happening at the same time: predation and competition. Consider two owl species living in the same landscape. The tawny owl is a predator, and the eagle owl is a predator too. But the eagle owl is larger, and researchers studying these owls in the Alps have found tawny owl among the eagle owl's prey. The relationship becomes even more interesting when you look at where those attacks occur. Tawny owl predation increased closer to eagle owl nests. So the smaller predator isn't simply sharing a landscape with another hunter. It is living inside a food web where a larger predator can also treat it as prey. That changes what competition means. Usually, when you think about competition, you imagine two animals trying to use the same limited resource. But if one competitor can also become food, the interaction becomes much more complicated. The larger predator may gain a meal while also removing a rival, while the smaller predator has to deal with a competitor that can potentially kill it. So another predator isn't automatically just an enemy or just a competitor. Depending on the relationship, it can be both, but that still doesn't mean attacking it is a good idea. The other predator may be edible, but it can also fight back. When a predator chases ordinary prey, the prey is usually trying to survive by getting away. It may run, hide, or fight if there is no other option. Another predator can respond very differently. Instead of simply trying to escape, it may turn toward the attacker and fight. That changes the entire calculation. When one predator approaches another, it isn't just approaching a potential meal. It is approaching an animal equipped with many of the same traits that make predators dangerous in the first place. Depending on the species, that can mean teeth, claws, speed, strength, or some combination of them. A successful attack can therefore come with a cost that continues long after the meal is gone. An injury to a limb, damage to a joint, or another serious wound can make future hunting much harder. The predator depends on its body for finding food, escaping danger, and competing with other animals. So an injury from one encounter can create problems long after that encounter has ended. This is what makes another predator such a complicated target. The attacker could gain food, and it might even reduce competition at the same time. But the encounter can also carry a much higher cost than an ordinary hunt. The balance depends heavily on the two animals involved. A much larger predator may have little difficulty overpowering a smaller one, while an encounter between similarly matched predators can become dangerous enough that the potential meal simply isn't worth the risk. So, the important question isn't whether predators are dangerous in general. It is how dangerous this particular target is compared with what the predator stands to gain. And even if that calculation favors the attack, there is another problem. The two predators still have to find each other. Two predators can live in the same ecosystem and still have surprisingly little contact. They may use different parts of the habitat, hunt at different times, search for different prey, or spend most of their lives moving through different areas. That means two species can overlap on a map without regularly overlapping in real life. Imagine two predators living in the same forest. One spends most of its time hunting in one part of the habitat, while the other uses a different area or becomes active at a different time. They technically share the same ecosystem, but from the perspective of an individual animal, the other predator may barely exist. This matters because predation requires more than the ability to kill. The predator has to encounter the target, and the target has to be accessible enough for an attack to happen. Habitat structure can influence that opportunity too. In studies of intra-guild predation, more complex habitat can reduce encounters and give smaller predators places where they can avoid larger ones. The presence of a predator can even change how another predator uses space. Instead of confronting a larger competitor directly, a smaller predator may alter where or when it moves through the environment. So sometimes the smaller predator doesn't survive by defeating the larger one. It survives because the two animals rarely create the kind of encounter that would allow an attack. That gives us another important piece of the puzzle. Food webs aren't only about what an animal can eat. They're also about which animals actually come into contact. And that becomes even more important when the usual food starts becoming harder to find. A predator doesn't have one permanent menu. What it eats depends partly on what is available. And when ordinary prey becomes harder to find, alternative prey can become more valuable. That doesn't mean hunger suddenly turns every predator into a predator eater. The more important change is that the value of different targets shifts. Imagine a predator searching an area where its usual prey has become difficult to find. It may have to search farther and spend more time looking, which can also increase the chances of encountering other predators that are responding to the same shortage. Now consider the competitor it normally ignores. Under ordinary conditions, attacking that animal might not make much sense. The target could be dangerous, difficult to catch, or simply less valuable than the prey already available. But if the familiar prey becomes scarce, the comparison changes. The other predator hasn't suddenly become weaker, safer, or easier to catch. What has changed is the value of the alternatives. A risky meal can become more attractive when the easier meals are no longer easy to find. A competitor that was previously ignored can become a potential source of food, especially if the predator is already encountering it while searching for other resources. This is why food availability matters so much. The value of another predator isn't fixed. It depends on what else is available, how difficult the target is to catch, how dangerous the encounter is, and how often the two animals actually meet. So predator-on-predator feeding isn't necessarily some strange reaction to extreme hunger. It can emerge naturally when the surrounding conditions change the balance between reward and cost. And once you understand that, the simple food chain starts to look very different. Picture the version of nature most of us learned as kids. Plants at the bottom, herbivores above them, and predators at the top. It's simple enough to draw on a classroom poster. But real ecosystems don't behave like a neat ladder. Add another predator, and the relationships start going in different directions. One predator eats the herbivore, another predator eats that predator, and the larger predator may also compete with the smaller one for some of the same prey. Now, the relationships aren't arranged in one clean line. They're connected. You don't have a ladder anymore. You have a network. And that changes how we should think about the word predator. It isn't a permanent position above everything else. An animal can be a predator in one relationship, a competitor in another, and prey in a third. Intra-guild predation creates exactly these kinds of connections. When one predator kills another, the effect can extend beyond those two animals because they may have shared prey and influenced the same parts of the ecosystem. If one predator suppresses another, the animals they both hunted can respond. Competition can change, prey populations can be affected, and the balance of the wider community can shift with it. So the original question was hiding a bigger mistake. We were treating predator like a permanent title. It isn't. Predator is a role created by a relationship. And once you stop imagining the food chain as a ladder, the question becomes much easier to understand. Predators don't need a rule telling them never to eat each other. The conditions around them determine whether doing so makes sense. Now we can put everything together. There isn't one rule preventing predators from eating other predators. Several conditions have to line up before that interaction becomes worthwhile. The animals need enough overlap to encounter each other, and the size or life stage relationship has to make an attack possible. The potential meal also has to provide enough benefit to justify the effort, while the risk of injury can't be too high. Food availability matters as well. If ordinary prey is abundant and relatively easy to catch, there may be little reason to take the extra risk of attacking another predator. But when familiar prey becomes scarce, or when an opportunity to attack a competitor becomes unusually favorable, the calculation can change. So the same predator can respond differently under different conditions. A target that was previously too risky may become worthwhile when other food becomes harder to find. A competitor that was normally ignored may become relevant when both animals are searching the same area. And a predator that rarely encounters another species may suddenly have much more contact with it when their movements and resources begin to overlap. That is why intra-guild predation can occur in some food webs without becoming the default behavior of every predator. The most accurate answer to the title isn't. Predators don't eat predators. They absolutely do. The real question is why they don't do it whenever they have the opportunity. And the answer comes back to the same basic calculation we started with. The potential reward has to make sense relative to the cost, risk, and opportunity involved. A predator isn't a permanent position at the top of the food chain. It's a role inside a network of relationships. Change the relationship, and the role can change with it. So the next time you picture a predator at the top of a food chain, don't assume the story ends there. Look at what surrounds it. There may be animals it hunts, animals it competes with, animals it avoids, and animals that could potentially hunt it. The label predator doesn't tell you where an animal permanently belongs. The relationships around it do. That is why one predator can spend its life hunting other animals while still being vulnerable to a larger predator, and why a competitor can sometimes become food when the conditions make that interaction worthwhile. You started with a simple question. Why don't predators eat other predators? The answer isn't that predators refuse to do it. They do. The interesting part is why they don't do it every time they have the chance. Because being able to kill something is only the beginning of the calculation. What matters is whether the encounter is possible, whether the target is worth the effort, and whether the reward is greater than the risk. That's why a predator isn't really a permanent position at the top of nature. It's a role inside a network. If you enjoy documentaries that take a simple question and uncover the hidden system underneath it, subscribe to the channel.